Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and this week starts off a brand new month, so of course that means it's time to jump back in to our ongoing retrospective of Spawn with Spawn number 32. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in June of 1995, we do see on the cover that this is in fact the official coming out party for what I consider to be the Capullo age of Spawn, where we get our first good look at the costume redesign from Greg Capullo. Of course, this is, a big step in Spawn's evolution. A lot of people, when they think of Spawn, the first image that comes to mind in their head is the Capullo Spawn costume design. And it is kind of crazy that in such a short period of time, just a little over 2 years, Todd was allowing someone else to redesign the costume of this character that he had left Marvel Comics to pursue. It's a big step, and it's a really big chance that he's taking here in, how the fan base is going to accept this. There's been a lot of pushback on Greg taking over the penciling duties of the book. A lot of people are upset about the fact that, Todd's not going as a one-man show anymore, and they feel like somehow he's letting them down in this way, which seems silly, especially given the fact that, at this point in time, Image Comics is becoming a more legitimately, larger comic book company, and also Todd started his own toy company, and he's also traveling around the country doing appearances at conventions and whatnot. And the idea that he could do all of this and be the sole, writer and illustrator and inker of a comic book on a monthly basis is kind of preposterous. So it's understandable that, Greg would take over some of the duties. But this is a big step right here of allowing Greg to give the character a new look. Now, granted, it's not completely removed from his original look, but still, it's a change. Story: Todd McFarlane. Art: Greg Capullo and Todd McFarlane. Copy, editor, and letters: Tom Orzechowski. Color: Steve Oliff and Ollie Optics. A special thanks to Kevin Conrad and Julia Simmons. We see here on the first page, Spawn is now back in action, but we can see already some differences in that his cape, while massive once again when compared to his body, is now tattered and shredded and not the kind of gallant sort of, opulent cape that it was before. And he's climbing up the side of a building, but this is no ordinary building. This is in fact the exact same building that Heaven is running its base of operations out of in New York City. And I think that's supposed to cover most of the Northeast of America as well, too. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe the entire Eastern Seaboard. And he is out for some answers and a little bit of revenge. As we saw in the last issue, he basically got his ass handed to him once again by the Redeemer, except this time Redeemer made off with his friend Bobby. This, of course, is because Bobby was brought back to life by Spawn, as Spawn used some of his own energy to do it. And that means that Bobby has some basically remnants of hell energy inside of his body, and Heaven's not too keen about that. We can see that the New York skyline is in full effect. Obviously, the Twin Towers still existed in 1995. That's why they're in the background. But at this point, Spawn is kind of taking a chance, as the costume is back and, theoretically better than ever. But this is after him just taking a monumental beating, and he's not 100% sure if everything's going to go according to plans, but he's too busy trying to save his friend to worry about that. And he's kind of having to just go with the flow here. We see that Spawn is scaling the building, and we're getting some closer looks this time. We can see that there's way more spikes coming out of his forearm than we've ever seen before. He's also having no trouble just barehanding his way up the side of the building, as his costume is able to create claws coming out of his fingers that can easily pierce into the steel and concrete that the building is made of. And Spawn, still not certain how things are going to play out, is very much determined to get to the bottom of things and save his friend. Meanwhile, inside of the building, the Angel Raphael, who, of course, has taken over the duties of Director of Terran Affairs, after Gabriel was removed from this position. Obviously, that happened when it was discovered that she had plotted to basically have Angela thrown into prison, and all over personal beefs that she had with her. This, of course, was a story that was completely outlined in the Angela miniseries. If you'd like to know about that, you can check out all 3 episodes on the Angela miniseries that I have here on this channel, and you can find them in my Spawn miniseries playlist. Raphael is preparing for some dignitaries to show up, and then trying to make sure that everything is perfect for this important meeting to show that she's more than capable of handling her promotion and being the new head of Terran Affairs, and kind of just, cleaning up the place after, what she considers to be a failing on Gabriel's part. As her secretary comes in and says that the dignitaries have arrived, Raphael says, let them in, but she's actually kind of a little bit nervous as to how this meeting is going to go. As Raphael makes her final preparations, putting out her cigarette, fixing her hair, hitting a little bit of breath spray, we see the doors open with a small contingency of what are assumed to be other angels, obviously kind of all fitting the same basic mold of the tall, lanky, attractive women. However, they're surrounding a very small and very elderly woman who, in this story, is supposed to be God in a physical form. As she enters, Raphael obviously is like, can I get you anything? And God says, no, I'm fine. We don't have a whole lot of time. There's quite a few other meetings. Come over here so I can get a look at you. As Raphael approaches, God says, oh my, you are certainly a pretty one. And then brings up something that I was a little bit surprised at, making the reference that Raphael's mother's name was Mary, and God asks if Raphael could refer to her as Mary just for this one time during this one meeting. And Raphael says, oh, I had forgotten all about that, and I'd be honored. That was such a pleasant memory you brought up. So this makes me question how exactly angels come to be in the Spawn universe, if they're, humans that ascend to being angels, or if the angels themselves reproduce. It's not really explained. And this is the first instance that we've ever heard of any of the angels having parents of any kind. As God then walks to the side, she or he or whatever, I don't know how it's supposed to be played out exactly in this story, states, I'm really upset about your predecessor not working out, and that we can't afford to have those kinds of errors anymore. Evil is always observant and looking for an opening. And then states something very important in the story, I think, that they are only here to listen and observe and only offer aid to those who seek it out. And even then, it can't be known that they're the ones who are doing it. And then God states, the human soul is salvation for us all, which is an interesting little bit of plot that I thought was thrown in here, stating that there is a really high value on human souls and how they play into the war between heaven and hell. However, during this entire exchange, nobody seems to notice that there's a little bit of red cape peeking up through the window from below. We then get a giant 2-page splash where Spawn bursts through the windows, making a grand entrance. Cape's going wild. Chains are going wild all over the place. Spikes are everywhere. There's so many spikes. Look at all these spikes, man. And Raphael, of course, is shocked at this intrusion. There's shattered glass going everywhere. I do wonder, though, with all of these spikes, because we didn't see this many spikes present on the cover, if this is just Greg kind of going wild and letting loose for the first grand reveal of Spawn's new look. Obviously, you've got the weird asymmetrical boot, the big gauntlet on the one side, and now the red is gone from the torso of his costume. It's not a complete departure from Spawn's original look, but it's definitely different. And I wonder if this is just Greg trying to zhuzh the whole thing up, or if this is supposed to be his costume, kind of upping its defenses as it just entered a room with God present in it. As we saw this exact same type of thing happen during the Angela miniseries, where his costume started kind of going overboard and upping its defenses when he was in heaven. It's never really stated if that's the case. It could just be that, Greg was trying to be, extra edgy for this one shot and kind of the rest of this issue. Or it could just be that he hadn't finalized exactly how he wanted this design to look, too. Either one is possible, and I'm not sure what the answer really is. As Spawn lands, we see that Raphael immediately calls for a security detail to show up, as God steps away and states that violence from either side will not end our difficulties. Spawn wastes no time in demanding where Bobby is at. However, Raphael says, "How dare you show up here? This violates the treaty. This was supposed to be a no-conflict zone. Your master knew that. And now the treaty is completely void. The ceasefire is void. What's taking security so long?" When suddenly a SWAT team of angels drops down from the ceiling, fully armored, packing heat. They all bring their guns up to the ready, pinpointing Spawn, as Raphael states, you need to surrender or die. Spawn, having no other options, decides that his best course of action is to take God hostage. However, he doesn't know that this little old lady is in fact God, but his costume certainly does, because the moment he touches her, his entire costume goes limp. All the chains, the cape, they all just fall immediately to the ground, as they're all being nullified by the holy energy of God and touching God directly. Spawn, of course, doesn't realize this and just thinks that the costume is still weak from his defeat and fight with the Redeemer earlier and its new transformation. We then flash back to a few hours earlier, after Spawn had awoken after the costume's transformation. He goes and searches down Cagliostro, who's the only person he can think of that might have any answers as to how he can save Bobby. Cog immediately gives him a business card and states, I can see that, you've transformed a little here, and you're still trying to learn. You might need this. Spawn takes the card, but says that it's blank when Cog tells him that it's information. And then he tells him, hey, you've still got a lot to learn. Why not, focus a little bit more and see if you can help your friends then? Look again. And then suddenly an address appears to the building that Heaven is operating out of. And Spawn immediately goes to the address, which leads him to where we are currently. As the angels then suddenly panic, as they're like, oh my God, he's got the leader. And Raphael's like, I know. And then Spawn's like, yeah, that's right, I've got her. Now all of you back away. Now, this is good that the angels actually don't call him on his bluff for a couple of reasons. Number one, Spawn actually had no intention of hurting God. Again, he doesn't know that this little old lady is God. And number two, he's not actually capable of hurting God, because God is way, way more powerful than Spawn. But again, he doesn't know that at all. And, funny enough, the angels actually don't know that he can't do anything to harm God either. He then states, no, not you. I want you to stay here. You're the one in charge. I want my friend Bobby back. However, Raphael says, you're an idiot. I can't believe that you've done this. If you harm her, I'm going to bring all of Heaven's wrath down upon you. And then Spawn states, look, I'm not concerned about me. I want my friend. And then Raphael says, your friend isn't even here. And an intelligent Spawn would have known that, which only means that your master has once again chosen a really weak candidate to be his messenger. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, we see that Terry Fitzgerald is having a coffee with his wife Wanda, the former wife of the late Al Simmons, aka Spawn, and he's telling her that while he does apologize for not being present in the lives of her and their daughter very much as of late, as he's been working nonstop to try and get to the bottom of exactly what was going on when the entirety of the police and the CIA and the mob were all after him, he's hit a roadblock. He can't figure out what he's missing, and he can't access any more information without taking one of the promotions that's been offered to him, as he believes that all of these promotional offers have been to try and buy his silence. But he states that one in particular is possibly the key to finding out the mystery that they're trying to solve, and that involves taking a position directly under Jason Wynn in Wynn's office. Wanda is surprised and says, you can't be serious, but Terry's like, no, I'm deadly serious about this, as he sets the envelope down on the ground, on the top of the table, and Wanda puts her hand over his, as they both just kind of realize that this is the only way they're going to get to the bottom of this, but it is incredibly dangerous for both Terry and their family, and they know that this is a very serious and grave situation that they're in. Meanwhile, in the office of Jason Wynn, he is receiving a phone call from none other than Chief Banks, who is completely panicked now that it has been admitted to him that somebody knows that he and Wynn were the ones who were giving the leads to Billy Kincaid so that Kincaid could go out and murder kids. And it's not really explained exactly why that was happening and how the two of them got involved with Billy Kincaid, but it is for certain that they're the ones. And now that Sam has let Chief Banks know that somebody knows this, not giving away that it's Sam and Twitch that know this, Banks is completely panicked, screaming that Wynn has to do something about this, that if anyone goes to the authorities, that their careers are going to be over. However, Wynn is not panicked at all, given that, he kind of is the authority. He's something like fourth in line after the president in terms of like how powerful he is in the U.S. government. And he tells Banks to calm down, that it's all being taken care of, and that he got a similar file from Spawn. Banks is like, why on earth would this, crazed superhero guy have access to any of this information? What's going on? But Wynn once again assures him like, hey, I'm taking care of this. It's all handled. Chill out. Stop worrying. Meanwhile, back at Heaven's base, we see that Spawn puts his hand above his head, igniting it with necro energy, and states to Raphael that he's nobody's puppet, in reference to the fact that he does not consider Mabulja to be his master. He then says that she's got 5 seconds to tell him where his friend is located, or that Granny here is going to be the proverbial eye for an eye. However, in the narrative bubble, we see that this is once again Spawn bluffing, as he has no intention of hurting God. But we also see once again that he couldn't, even if he wanted to. Raphael then states, you're crazy. Your friend isn't even here. He's not even on Earth. And Spawn says, hey, that's not my problem. You got to figure it out. As he starts to count down from 5, 4, 3, 2. But we see during this countdown the whole time, God is slowly absorbing all of the necro energy. And as Spawn's about to get to 1, Raphael finally concedes and says, all right, you win. I'll take care of it. Which is a good thing, because at this exact moment, as Spawn was just about to have his bluff called, he realizes that all of his powers have disappeared and he has no abilities whatsoever. Raphael gets on a cell phone and calls to the orbital station, stating that she wants the subject returned to her location. However, the angels on the station state, well, we're not going to be able to do that. We're kind of in the middle of some experiments, and we've found some interesting readings that we're investigating. However, Raphael cuts them off and states, no, you don't get it. This isn't a request. This is a command. And since you both answer to me, you're going to send him back to Earth right now with the proper escort. Is that understood? At which point the angels say, affirmative, yes, ma'am, sorry. And we see that Bobby is being subjected to what is assumedly a bunch of horrific experiments, as he seems to be in terrible pain, as the angels on the station don't seem to have any regard for human life in any way, as we've seen them in the past basically torture the people that they've turned into the Redeemer, and seem to be doing the exact same thing to Bobby here to try and get to the bottom of how he was reanimated. Seconds later, there's a flash of light in the room, and Bobby reappears in front of Spawn. However, he's accompanied by none other than the Redeemer. Now, Spawn was actually counting on this being the case. As he releases God and his costume immediately springs back to life, he tells them that if they release Bobby, he'll go peacefully. However, Raphael states that that's no longer an option, as he's broken the treaty between the two realms, and at this point they have no intention of letting Spawn leave alive, as she orders the Redeemer to finish him immediately. Redeemer springs into action, lunging towards Spawn, and for a moment Spawn starts to question the validity of his plan, as he was basically, dominated by the Redeemer in their last battle, and he's not certain if he's going to be able to get him and Bobby out of here alive. However, his costume, now seemingly more powerful than ever, wastes no time in springing into action as the chains and cape start to assault the Redeemer, smacking him out of the air, going nuts. Spawn tells Bobby to click clear and grab the old lady and save her, as he realizes that the costume is acting completely of its own accord, and he's not even having to think about what it's doing to defend him. Spawn's cape then grabs the Redeemer and slams him up into the ceiling as Spawn once again yells at Bobby to get Grandma clear. Bobby grabs the old woman and says, "Come on, lady, what are you waiting for? You're going to get killed." The Redeemer then unleashes a blast of elemental fire trying to kill Spawn. However, his chains actually grab the ground and launch him upward out of harm's way as his cape then severs the Redeemer's hand clean off. With the Redeemer's hand now missing, the stump of his forearm starts unleashing all of his elemental fire as he no longer has a way to control this blast of energy. At this point, he accidentally separates both Bobby and God from each other as he blasts a chasm between them. And this elemental fire actually poses a threat to the angels in the room as well. Spawn, however, as he sees this in the corner of his eye, turns his back on the Redeemer and makes his way back towards God and states, "I've got to get you out of here. I'm really sorry about before, but it was the only thing I could think of to save my friend." God says, "It's okay, I understand," as Spawn says, "Come on, let's get you out of here and get you to safety." However, before that can happen, he's hit from behind with a blast of elemental fire that knocks both him and Bobby for a loop through the air as God watches from the sidelines. As Spawn and Bobby crash through the wall of the room back into Raphael's office, they are still okay, and Spawn was actually able to tank the hit from the Redeemer's elemental fire, which is kind of a precursor to how much stronger he is now. However, before they can get their bearings, the Angel SWAT team runs in behind them and opens fire, stating, "Don't let him escape." Spawn then covers his friend and tries to protect him as the cape wraps around the both of them. Bobby says, "Spawn, or Al, you got to do something, man." And Spawn says, "Okay, hang on, Bobby, we're going to." And suddenly there's a massive explosion of necro energy as the two of them teleport out of the room and suddenly reappear back in the alleyways. Spawn is completely unconscious, and Bobby looks up to see Cagliostro. He states, "Cog, you got to help Al, man. I think he's hurt." But Cagliostro tells him, "No, he's just unconscious. He'll be fine." And he's actually doing pretty well for himself, considering he just has survived an encounter with God. And Bobby states, "Holy crap, you mean God was up there?" And Cog's like, "Yeah, God can take a lot of different forms if he wants to, and, isn't always what you'd expect to see." We also see on the power meter that Spawn used about 100 clicks of his power in that encounter between when we last saw him in the end of issue number 31 and at the end of this issue, which means he really shouldn't be engaging in this kind of battle very often, or he's going to be running out of power real quick. Meanwhile, back at Heaven's base, we see the angels surround Raphael, accusing her of failing in her duties. However, Raphael says that it was actually the security system that failed. But one of the angels says that's impossible. None of them have ever been able to breach this place before. However, God then interrupts all of them and states nothing has failed. Actually, the security system is designed simply to block people who do not believe or those who are truly evil from entering, and that Spawn is actually neither. God then states that the angels are too quick to act and that Spawn is actually on a quest and has many questions that he's looking for answers for. And that from what God witnessed today, neither side is actually truly ready for the final battle. God then explains to the angels that while Al doesn't know it, God is the one that allowed Simmons to enter. And that is because Spawn in this case was not acting on his own accord. He was acting on behalf of a friend that he was trying to save. And that, despite him being on this crazy journey, that there's definitely a spark that's been ignited today, and that one day with guidance, Spawn's time will come, and he will truly be the one, as we see God float out the side of the building through the giant gaping hole, and I guess back to heaven. But this is definitely a key piece of cryptic foreshadowing that will make a lot more sense in the future. We then get a 6-page prelude to Spawn Blood Feud, which is a miniseries that you will all be seeing episodes on in the very near future. It starts off as our old friend the Curse awakens, and he believes that he's still in the alleyways as he's groggy and still not totally with it after being defeated by Spawn and being strung up in the alleyways for weeks. But as he opens his eyes and starts to look around, he realizes that his location is moved and he doesn't know how he got to where he is. As Curse looks around trying to get a bearing of where he is and what his surroundings are, he is suddenly interrupted when an unfamiliar voice starts to speak to him, stating that he found Curse crucified in the alleyway and has moved him here as a means to try and help him. Curse, however, is not too pleased about this, as he states, you're going to suffer for all of this impudence that you've committed against me, and starts making all kinds of threats, which, by the way, he's in no position to do. As we can see, he's still tied up and defenseless. However, his captor now is a man by the name of John, who claims to be a monster hunter. And as we can see, John's a little bit on the crazy side, and he starts to approach Curse, stating that he needs to have a conversation with him. Curse is like, well, what do you want? As he seems to start to realize that, he's not in the greatest position right now. As John grabs him and pulls him closer, he looks at Curse and states, I need you to answer a question for me. I need to know about your captor. And Curse is like, okay, what's the question? And John states, I need to know exactly how many times you've seen the monster Spawn drink the blood of small children. And Curse is shocked by this question. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I hate Spawn just as much as you do, and I am sworn to destroy him. But I've never seen him do that, and I don't believe he would ever sink to such depravities. However, we then see John state, oh, that's too bad that you're not, willing to confirm my unfounded biases. Not stating it that way, but that's basically what it is. And he's like, let's try this again. John then rips Curse's arm clean off, showing that he's actually pretty strong, stating that wasn't the right answer. As he holds Curse's arm and Curse grovels, saying, oh my God, that hurts. And John's like, oh, does it now? He's like, I'm going to ask you again, how many times have you seen Spawn drink the blood of small children? At this point, Curse kind of wises up to what the game is and realizes that he may not be dealing with a guy who's got a full deck. And he says, oh, dozens, maybe hundreds of times. As John throws Curse's arm away, he states, oh my goodness, it's as bad as I thought. So I'm going to need you to tell me everything that you know about Spawn. Where he goes to, when he sleeps, all of his movements, everything that you've witnessed. And Curse states, okay, I can do that and you're not going to hurt me anymore. And John says, oh no, I'm going to continue to hurt you the entire time. And I'd actually be very happy if you didn't struggle too much, because I've gotten you strung up by the ropes of the bells in this cathedral, and it'll make a lot of racket. And I don't think that the people in this neighborhood would be too happy if they were kept up all night long. As he starts to torture Curse and Curse begs him to stop, we hear the bells of the cathedral start to ring violently. As we zoom away from the cathedral into another part of the town, still seeing the gadong gadong sound effect of the bells, as we make our way across town to see a familiar sight that is the Cape of Spawn. On the last page of the book, we get an image of Spawn sitting on the edge of a building, hovering over a gargoyle, as it states that no one needs to question who the bell tolls, because the bell tolls for thee. As we see that this is the end of the prelude to the Spawn Blood Feud miniseries. But this does show that the costume change was actually months in the works, as this version of Spawn is again depicted wearing the new Capullo costume. On the next page, we get image info, the same old blurbs about upcoming Image books, a little bit of stuff about what was going on at Image Comics. Nothing really special to see here. We then reach the spawning ground, which takes up the very final page of the book and the reverse inside cover. Most of the letters, however, in this issue are basically kind of, I don't want to say condemning, but complaining to Todd about the way that he portrayed the American South in issue number 30. If you don't know what I'm talking about, feel free to go back and watch my episode on issue number 30. But it does involve the KKK and Spawn fighting against them, and has a lot of themes revolving around racism in America. And they believe that Todd was being basically unfair about it. Now, one reader did actually bring up a good point, is in that in the issue before that, where Spawn was dealing with Eddie and Andy, the two young boys, and their abusive father, he was in Alabama. Now, in issue number 30, he's still in Alabama, but it states that he's been walking for 1,000 miles, which means that he shouldn't have been in the state of Alabama anymore. He should have been somewhere else in America. But we're just going to overlook that little continuity error there. Their complaint was mostly that he just portrayed the American South in the most negative and stereotypical light. And that's sort of echoing a little bit of what my critique on the story was. I also felt like he made the KKK a little bit too cartoonish and over the top, as, you know, they weren't supervillains, they were regular people. And given the very serious nature of the story of that book, I didn't feel like that Todd should have done anything that could have potentially trivialized the narrative in that instance. Obviously, you can hear all my thoughts about that in that episode. Their complaints being that he was, you know, making the South seem to be something that it wasn't. And I kind of understand that. As someone who's lived in the American South for over 30 years at this point, most of my life actually, you know, the portrayal of the South being nothing but racist and stupid is not accurate. Obviously, there are stupid people here. Obviously, there are racist people here. And there are stupid and racist people here. But it's not everybody. And that was kind of the point that they were making, that they felt like Todd was just kind of, you know, portraying the South the way that it always gets portrayed, as just nothing but ignorant racist, and there are no other people outside of that. And I kind of understand that complaint. However, in Todd's defense, he was born and raised in Canada, so his entire exposure to the American South throughout most of his life would have only been what he saw in television and movies, which overwhelmingly all portray the South in the exact same way. So I could understand where he would come up with those ideas. Again, this is all in a very pre and early internet age. So it wasn't like he could just, you know, get online and look up things and, you know, find out about different parts of, you know, the American country that he didn't grow up in. So I'm not really faulting him for it. You know, it's just one of those things where, you know, Todd did maybe step on some people's toes. And to his credit, he actually apologizes to some people in this letter section where he states, look, if I offended you by this, I am sorry. You know, perhaps you're right. Maybe I did go a little too overboard with it, and that wasn't my intention. So kudos to Todd for actually, you know, being like, hey, I might have got this wrong. And if that's the case, I'm sorry. And that was Spawn number 32. Overall, I think it's a fantastic book. I thought it was a great debut for the new costume, a fantastic way to kind of show everybody the new look, show everybody that Spawn's now more powerful than he's ever been. You know, give us a little bit more insight into the war between heaven and hell, giving us our first appearance of God, quote unquote, in the Spawn series. This is the first, you know, real, like, showing of, like, a deeper, I guess, explanation of how all this war is coming together, but also showing that despite Spawn being, you know, one of the soldiers of Mavulja, God still has, like, a completely different view of him than the angels do, which is pretty, you know, unique. You wouldn't expect that, the way that the story has played out thus far. So it's kind of a little bit of a surprise to see that if you hadn't read these books before. And to see that, you know, God still has, like, this overarching plan of the way things are going to go. and that even the angels are not really privy to that. I thought that was a cool little narrative choice. And also like the little bit of foreshadowing that we got at the end of at the end of the story, that, you know, it's going to take a while for that to play out. We also got the little prelude of Spawn Blood Feud. As I stated, later this month, I'm going to start getting into Spawn Blood Feud, as well as, you know, keep going with the Violator versus Badrock miniseries. Whole lot of Spawn stuff going on right now. And if you've ever wondered why it is that I do those miniseries month by month by month, it's because as I'm going through the Spawn ongoing series each and every month, I have to keep the continuity correct with making sure that the miniseries videos are coming out at about the right time that they should be to make sense with the rest of the ongoing story. Whereas some other miniseries, it wouldn't really matter as much because this is the only series I have that I make a point to do every single month like this. So that's the explanation behind that. But in terms of the way I feel about this comic book, I think it was terrific. I love everything about it. Maybe the cover could have had a background on it. That would have been a little bit nicer. But, you know, I understand Greg might have been pressed for time. But then again, these are just my opinions. Your opinions may be completely different, and if so, that's okay, because everyone's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.